Okay, so this is my 2019 Sinnis Hoodlum. I've had it for about 7 or 8 months, and I've put almost 11,000 miles on it. So I'm going to give a review of everything I think about the bike, and, say what I think about it. Is it a good bike? Just first start off with the modifications that I've put onto this, because this is not all as standard. So, starting at the front, I've put on a batwing, so it works better in the rain, because the rain doesn't hit you as much, the wind goes over your head and doesn't hit you full on. Reflective rim tape just helps to be seen. New front indicators, so these ones are flowing, so if I flick them on there, they're the flowing style. LED headlight, because the stock one is pretty rubbish. Then I've put on an aftermarket exhaust, because the Toro one wasn't released, and it took forever to release. I made my own system. So this is the standard pipe, but I cut it off here and attached a cheap slip-on off Amazon onto it. Tank grips and tank bag, just extra storage. Phone charger, which is always handy, and a phone grip. I fitted a LED light system into it. That doesn't work at the moment because I haven't only changed the batteries in the remote. Then going back, I've moved the number plate. It's down here, it's still got a light on it, it's just attached through the axle there. And it is mounted sideways. Then we have, saddlebags, sissy bar, which I've added. And then this bag here, which is where the number plate would have sat usually. So that's why I've changed all that. This bike I've made for commuting and carrying a lot of stuff. Right, so now I'll go for a little ride on the bike, and while I'm riding I'll explain some things about the bike, what I think of it, and just give a bit more information. So, and let's hear the aftermarket exhaust, because it's something a lot of people want, and the Toro system costs about 200 quid. This fix cost me, I think, 30. So it sounds pretty good for 30 quid. Alright, let's get going. So obviously, Sinnis Hoodlum is a 125. This engine is the same one as in the Hoodlum, in the Terrain and the RSX, just geared a bit differently. 11.2 horsepower, so it's not the fastest thing ever, and it's not the full 15, but it's still plenty. I mean, it will usually hold about 60, if it's uphill, 50, 55. At a push on a downhill you can get up to 70, and the absolute highest that I've had it up to on a dual carriageway was 77, which is hitting the rev limiter, but as stock that's as fast as this bike can go, which is enough. It will hold 60. I rarely have an issue keeping up with traffic. For city riding it's ideal. And even for long touring, I'd say this is one of the better 125s for it. Okay, it's not particularly fast, and you can't keep up with dual carriageway or motorway traffic, but you can, as I've done, I've packed a lot of stuff onto it. It can carry a lot, and it's comfy. The foot pegs aren't all the way forwards. It's closer to naked bike style than traditional cruiser. But they are footboards, so it's comfy. They're still out in front of you. Seats nice and far back. Handlebars are up. It's a comfy bike. I've ridden this thing for 4 hours in a day plus, and not ached, not got tired, not had any issues with it. So you could tour on it. I have trips planned for this summer that are long trips. Me and some of my mates on 125s, we want to do a lot of trips. They're far, and this bike is perfect for that, in my opinion. Obviously, all of this is my opinion, it's not fact. This is how I feel about the bike. I enjoy it. I think you can realise that enough. The bad points about the bike, I will say the bad points. Bad points are obviously the power. It's not as fast as a 125 can go. Obviously it goes up to, you can have up to 15 horsepower, and this is only 11.3. It's not the fastest thing ever. You will get overtaken, as with any 125. Now, I don't know if this is all Sinnis Hoodlums, but indicators. If it rains, my indicators stick. I have to really push it to turn them off, but that's only in heavy rain, so it's not a major issue. Actually, let's not go this way, let's go this way. That's an issue. The rear brake. Now, the rear brake pedal, obviously because of where it is, it needs it's got a lot of linkages to get it moving into the cylinder, the brake cylinder, whatever you call it, brake reservoir. If you don't wash it or lube it, I've had issues where the rear brake pedal will stick. It will be extremely hard to push down, and when you push it down, it won't release back up by itself. But obviously keep on top of that, keep an eye on it, it's no issue. What are the bad ones? I'm going to do the all bad points first. So, the chain. Now the chain, I find, loosens very quickly. I will do about 200, 250 miles, maybe 300 before the chain needs adjusting. And even when it's adjusted properly, it slaps a lot. Like on the swing arm and that, you can hear it slapping. Once you get used to it, obviously it's fine and you can tell when it's getting too loose. But it's something I was nervous about when I first had the bike. But when it's snapping, it doesn't mean it's too loose, because I find it does it when it's tightened correctly. Other issues are the rear tyre that it comes stock with it's not the worst tyre, but it's not great. I've come off on it in the wet while doing less than 10 miles an hour, so you might want to get that changed, as I've done now. I can't remember what tyre it is, but it's much better now. I've had no issues with the rear slipping, whereas before I had a few. The front tyre I've never had an issue with, and I've kept that as it is. Almost 11,000 miles on that front tyre, and it's barely warm. So I'll say that's definitely a good point. You won't have to change your front tyre a lot if you keep it as stock. I don't know if it's the weight of the bike that makes it like that, or how the bike handles, or the size of the tyre. But that stock tyre has done 11,000 miles and it's barely warm. The Speedo doesn't, for some reason, doesn't engage from a standstill until I'm hitting about 10 miles an hour. If I accelerate quickly, it won't catch up and it will stay at 0 miles an hour until I hit about 10 and then jump all the way up. Again, no, this is all, I don't know if any of these ones are just my bike or if they're one with all the bikes. But none of them are major issues. There's no major issues with it that I've had. Other than I've had one bolt fall out, which was probably, like, I should have checked it, but they're all tight. That's not the bike's fault. Obviously, when you get a brand new Chinese bike, you might want to check all the bolts. But I've had no issues with bolts being loose apart from that one. Another bad point, as I mentioned earlier, the stock headlight bulb is terrible. Even on high beam, it's dangerous to ride at night. I swapped it out for a 25 quid LED bulb and it's a lot better. The stock mirrors vibrate a bit. I don't know if this is coming out on camera, but I'm flat out doing almost 60. I can see there's a car behind me from the two headlights, but other than that, you can't make out any details unless you're off the throttle. So that's an issue. But again, not a major one. There's probably a way around that. I just haven't felt the need. I've had no major issues with it. It works fine for me. But it's a fun bike. It's not the fastest thing ever, but you can chuck it into corners. You can fly around corners and have fun on twisty roads. I'm doing 60 around these bends here. It's not leaned over all the way. But it doesn't lean too far. You can scrape the footboards on it. Both of mine have had a bit of the metal shaved away from it scraping on the floor. Obviously my right one can't do that now because my number plate hits the floor before the board does. But they fold up, so if you do end up scraping them along the floor, it's not an issue. They fold up. But realistically, unless you're trying to go fast, you're not going to have any issues with it hitting the floor. They're high enough up and they're tucked enough in that you can lean over a considerable way. before they're not a big issue. It's just a thing. If you want this bike to go fast, not the bike for you. But if you want a comfy bike that you can chuck round and have fun with, I highly recommend this bike. I paid 2,250 quid on the road for this, brand new, and yeah, it's been an amazing bike. I've ridden it through the summer, I've ridden it through the winter, coming into spring now, and I love it. Would I change things about it as it is now? Probably not. Okay, maybe it could have more power, maybe the headlight could be better, maybe it could be lighter, but it's a great bike. Oh, back on to bad points. The rear brake is a bit meh. It's not that easy to tell how much pressure you're putting on it. I mainly end up using the front, just out of preference. But, I mean, you can tell it's when it's engaging, it's just a bit hard to get feedback from it. I don't know if, again, that's just me, if that's the bike, if it's the boots I'm wearing, who knows. And a downside of the boards being so far forwards is that in the wet your feet will get soaked. I wear full waterproof gear, but my ankles still get soaked because of how much water, like where your feet are, they're right next to that wheel. They're directly in the area that the front wheel will kick water up into. So again, something to bear in mind if you're riding this all year round as a commuter. Bear in mind these roads are mostly slightly uphill. Like they've got, not uphill, they've got hills in them. They're all 50 to 60 mile an hour speed limits. But that's not an issue on the bike. Okay, you get to an uphill, you're in 5th, you're flat out, you're maybe doing 55, 50 in a 60. If you wanted to, you could drop into 4th. 4th doesn't redline till 60 miles an hour. You could, but I don't want to put too much strain on the engine. But it's not an issue. You're not going miles slower than the traffic. And I usually find that I'm going far. I go slower. That I'm trying to go far. I want to go faster, and I can go faster than the traffic goes most of the time on this bike. It's not slow. Okay, I'm flat out here in 5th. This Jaguar's getting away from me, but this bike isn't a fast bike. This is a comfy bike for those who like the cruiser style, or want something comfy, or or want something cheap. It's not the cheapest Sinnis bike, but it is great. It's cheaper than the Terrain. It's about the same as the RSX, so it depends if you want naked or a cruiser style. You get a lot of bike, like it's all metal, metal mudguard, metal rear fender. Okay, the side panel's plastic, but it's all like metal tank. A lot of it's metal. Gearbox. Now, I find that occasionally going from 1 to 2nd, if you have to give it a big kick, otherwise you will hit neutral. And I do hit quite a few fast neutrals on this bike. Cheap gearbox, cheap bike, who cares? Let's compare this bike to, say, Honda Grom. That thing's a grand 1,250 quid more than this bike, brand new. Its top speed is lower, its acceleration is probably about the same. I'm not entirely sure on that, but this thing has a higher top speed. It's much better for carrying a pillion. I've ridden with a pillion quite a lot on this bike. It's comfy to have a pillion on. Because of how long it is, it's sometimes a bit uneven at slow speeds, but there's so much room back there that it's comfy, and I have no issues with it. So if you did want to go 2-up on it, okay, it makes it a lot slower, but I've hit 70 on it with a pillion on more or less flat, slightly downhill. It's a 125, what do you expect? You can't expect it to be amazing with a pillion and be exactly the same. But what can I say? It's a great bike. It's cheap. I get about 300 miles to about 300 miles to a tank on this bike. It's cheap to run. It's cheap to maintain. The parts for it are cheap. You can buy a brand new engine for I think 500 quid pre-assembled. All the parts you can buy online. There's a few places that make basically you can. If Not saying you would want to, because it'd probably work out more expensive, but you could build this bike from the parts that they sell online. You can buy every single part of it from someone, and most of it's from the same place as well. Chinese motorcycle parts online, they do a lot of the parts for this bike. You can buy them pretty much every single part for this bike off there. So let's just go flat out down here. So that's 30 miles an hour, 45, 50. Let's see how fast we can get it going down here. So 55, give it enough time. That's 60, there you go. And yeah, you can chuck this thing around corners. It doesn't have to be ridden slowly. It's not all cruisers. This thing will trust me on this. This thing can fly around corners if you lean on it, if you push it, if you hang off it a little bit. So you can ride it as aggressively as someone on a little 125 sport bike of the same power and the same weight and all that. Okay, they might be able to lean slightly lower, but on a little 125 with not much grip, do you really want to? This bike is fun, it's fast enough, flat out, okay it's a 60 here, I've got the wind against me, flat out doing just under 50, but you don't buy a 125 because it's fast. You buy it because it's cheap, it's comfy, it's cheap to run, cheap to maintain, easy to maintain, it's a single cylinder. They're basically bomb-proof engines. I floor this thing all the time. I'm pretty much always at high revs. I push it a lot because I'm out with my mates a lot. So I'm flying around, high revs, and it's great. This engine has been abused for 11,000 miles, and I mean abused, and no issues. At least none yet, obviously. Maybe further down the line, but with a 2-year warranty, who cares? And he is AA breakdown cover, which is something no one else offers. Now thankfully I haven't ever had to use that yet, but it's nice they have that much faith in their products that they'll throw that in for you. But the one thing this bike does desperately need to, if you buy one, is an aftermarket exhaust. It sounds terrible stock. It's nowhere near loud enough. Well, I say loud enough is a preference of mine. I like my bikes to be loud. As is, this system I have is too loud for my liking, but it costs 30 quid, so I can't complain too much about it. And then all the little issues I have with this bike, I can't complain about them much. It cost me about the same as a probably 4 or 5 year old big brand bike would have, that's been chucked around by a learner, hasn't been looked after, and has 10,000 miles on it, maybe 15, maybe 20. It's cheap, it's fun, it's fast enough, and it'll get you from A to B. And it's a great looking bike, even stock, it's a great looking bike. I prefer how it looks now to how it did. I'll probably throw a picture of now and a picture of how it looked when I got it, maybe a stock image, maybe one I took of it, I don't know. But it's a great looking bike, either way, however you decorate it. It's a nice looking bike, and for the money, you want a little a bike to customise. Brand new or even second hand. I've seen these things, they're usually about £1,000 for a year, grand and a half for a year-old bike with maybe 10,000 miles on it. This is the highest mileage 1-year-old Sinnis Hoodlum, less than a year-old Sinnis Hoodlum that I've seen. I think it probably is, because I do a lot of commuting, I've done a lot of big trips. The summer I spent nearly every day that I wasn't working on my bike, doing 2, 3, 4 hour days on it, and it's no issue. It's comfy. I mean, okay, you're flat out most of the time if you're on a long road that's over a 40 mile an hour speed limit, But does it matter? It's going to be the same with pretty much any 125. And some 125s will cost twice as much as this bike. I've often heard the argument, is this half the bike that a big brand, say Yamaha R125 is? No! These bikes are amazing. They'll go on for ages. They're a bulletproof engine. As long as you get a fuel injected one, carbureted, nothing goes wrong with the engine, it's the carb itself. But it's a cheap carb. Fuel injection works so much better. But it's not half the bike. It will do everything that bike will do. Maybe it'll be a bit slower, but it will do everything that bike will do. And for around town, this bike is perfect. It's low. Okay, it's not the lightest thing, but all the weight is low, so it's really easy to flick around between cars. The bars, they're narrowish. There's narrower bars, but there's wider bars. And the bars come with it, I find, are great. They're a nice height. But this bike can be flicked around, it can filter easily, it can filter well, and it'll beat with the way most people drive and the cars that most people have, you can beat people off the line on this. So if you come to a red light, you're in between two lanes of cars and you need to try and, get ahead so that you're not stuck between the two cars, you can. Unless they're in, obviously, a really powerful car, or they try and set off stupidly quickly, most of the time, you will beat them. If it's a little 1 litre car, 1 litre engine, not turbocharged, whatever, you can probably beat them off the line even if they're trying. That's the nature with bikes, it's the nature with 125s. And that's happened. I've had it where I can beat people off the line, and I've had no issues with the bike. Nothing other than maybe the top speed on dual carriageways. Other than that, yeah, you drop behind a little bit. You can't overtake a big lorry if you get stuck behind one. The main thing about 125s, but like this bike, but also 125s, is the overtaking potential. They're not powerful enough in 5th, 4th gear. Like, you'll be sat there for too long trying to overtake them. It won't be possible, but still 125s. There's nothing about this bike I've ever had an issue with. I have no issues with any of it. Nothing about this bike. I would highly recommend this bike to anyone that wants a cruiser style, that wants a cheap bike to run around, to use as a commuter. Like, other than the few minor things, there's nothing major to say about it that's negative that comes to mind. Big bike. Yeah, it's great. You see, I abuse this engine. I push it to high revs most of the time, and because I'm always checking on corners, I bought a bike to have fun. I didn't want to just sit there on a bike and ride it. I wanted to chuck it around corners, to go flat out, to filter. This bike will give you the experience of motorcycling all day. But personally, out of all the bikes I considered, I'm glad I chose this one. I considered the Terrain, I considered the RSX. It's a great little bike. The issues it has are minor, but I've had no major issues with the gearbox, no major issues with the engine, no major issues with rust, no issues with the frame. Oh, suspension though. Suspension is very jarring on the back. The front is good. The front is alright and acceptable, but the back's a bit rough on you. You hit a bump and you sometimes get thrown into the air a little bit, but it's budget suspension. The bike's built on a budget, and you can't complain too much because of that. But it's something to be aware of. But most Chinese bikes have not amazing suspension. It's built to a budget. You can't expect this bike to do everything. This bike does everything. It does everything. It doesn't do it well, but it will do anything you want it to. It will do long rides. It will go fast-ish. It can be thrown around corners. You can commute on it, you can tour on it, you can use it as a summer runaround. Foot plate scraping again there. Like, you can do whatever you want to this bike. It can be used for anything. And the price makes it so much better. Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up my review. I don't want to repeat myself too much. I know I have. I've repeated myself a little bit, but I don't want to do that too much. In my opinion, the bike's amazing for the money. Even if for an extra, like for the same price as a Honda Grom, this bike would still be amazing. I'd still have bought it. It's a great bike. Not much more else I can say about that.